In the quest to smash through the so-called glass ceiling of the modern workplace, a new Canadian initiative is targeting business leaders in the pursuit of progress. The campaign is called #GoSponsorHer, and it brings Megan Anderson to her studio. She's a consultant with McKinsey & Company and a co-creator of this effort. Welcome, Megan. It's nice to have you here.
Thanks, it's nice to be here.
Let's get into the numbers of women in the workplace. Canada does a good job at hiring women, but struggles to advance them. Women held approximately 12% of all board seats at TSX-listed companies. About 47% of companies had no women directors, and 43% had no women executive officers. Women are promoted 30% less often than men. Are you surprised with that?
No. No, these are numbers that I'm very familiar with.
And while women are equally as likely as men to have mentors, according to US statistics, women are 46% less likely to have sponsors.
That's right.
Now, before we start talking about Go Sponsor Her, I wanted to ask you, what is the difference between mentoring and sponsoring?
Yeah, so sponsorship is like mentorship on steroids. So it's a much bigger commitment. And basically what a sponsor does for you is takes an active interest in your career and creating opportunities for you, whereas a mentor gives you advice. So to illustrate kind of how the conversation would go, a mentor would say, you know, this is a great opportunity, you should go think about this. A sponsor would say, this is a great opportunity, and here's how we're gonna get you there. I'm gonna make this introduction for you. Let's make sure that you have a speaking role in this meeting so this person sees you as really high potential. We're gonna practice your speech, whatever, but it's a really active role, making sure that you're pressing forward to that next opportunity.
And advocating for that candidate.
100%.
What is Go Sponsor Her? #GoSponsorHer.
Yes, so #GoSponsorHer is a social media campaign in order to increase the number of these relationships in the workplace. And so basically it's a campaign that calls for leaders to sponsor a high potential woman in their network, take a picture of them together, post it on social media with the #GoSponsorHer, and then challenge other leaders to do the same. So think very much like ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. And in the meantime, we will use all of the activity as a platform to start educating the world about what sponsorship is, why it matters, why women are under-sponsored, and why we need to do something about this.
I mean, some people might say it's 2017. Do we really need that? Why launch this?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, right? I think, so my co-founder Laura and I feel really passionately about sponsorship. And we've both been pretty involved in women in the workplace, Laura through the public sector, me through the private sector. And so, rewind 6 months ago, we were really thinking about what can we do here? How can we move the needle? So we started doing a bunch of interviews with a bunch of senior leaders, both men and women. And the one thing, I guess, unsurprisingly, that we heard over and over again was that what had really moved the needle for them was having someone take them under their wing. Someone in their career who had kind of championed them through and helped make things happen for them.
And I recently did an interview with my former boss, Denise Donlin, music executive in Canada. And she said when she was working at Sony Music, she was leaning in so much, she was practically lying on top of the table. Has leaning in been successful for women?
Yeah, so I think Lean In is a great concept, great book. I mean, I love Sheryl Sandberg. I love the whole idea. And I think it's certainly helpful, but it's not gonna get us the whole way there. Men are 46% more likely to have these people who are advocating for them behind the scenes. And so you can lie on the table all you want, but if you have no one in those meetings that you're not in saying, yeah, hey, this girl is really great, it's hard to get anywhere when you have male counterparts who do have those relationships.
And lean in, obviously, Sheryl was saying that women need to they need to advocate for themselves and put their hands up in order to be successful.
Yeah.
Incidentally, she had a lot of males who advocated for her, but that's another conversation.
Yeah.
How often do senior leaders stick their necks out to rally up-and-coming employees? Is this common?
Yeah, I think it happens all the time. And if I look at my career, I think I've seen lots of examples where people have stepped in either when I'm sitting in the room and they've vouched for me, or behind closed doors I've heard that someone has vouched for me.
And why do men tend to sponsor other men more?
So that's kind of the million-dollar question, I guess. There is some really interesting research that HBR did, and it's kind of the elephant in the room, kind of the underlying tension of worrying about what people might think if.
Well, let me read something from that article.
Yeah, go for it.
So what is it about cross-gender professional relationships that flood other men with anxiety? Partially, these guys are rattled by the prospect of close, caring, but non-sexual developmental relationships with women at work. They're not alone. One 2010 survey found that half of junior women and almost 2/3 of senior men shied away from one-on-one mentoring relationships due to concerns that someone might perceive a sexual relationship where there was none.
Yep.
Have you found this to be true for your research that when you did to launch hashtag Go Sponsor Her?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've definitely heard it from people time and time again that this is a concern among our peers and among leaders. It is something that's in the back of people's heads. The concern that what it will look like to the outside, and I think it's something that has built up over time. It's just kind of a social cultural norm. And so one of the things we're trying to do with Go Sponsor Her is fight that, right? By posting these pictures all over the place of men sponsoring women, women sponsoring women, any gender sponsoring women. We celebrate it. We say we have nothing to hide. This is great. This is what needs to happen. It's a huge cornerstone of the campaign.
I have a group of women that I rely on, and there's this perception that women don't help women. Do women do enough to help other women?
Honestly, I think women are doing a lot. I think when you look at the stats, 80% of leadership, 80% of the C-suite is in fact men. And so we can't expect to get to 50-50 if we're asking 20% of leadership to sponsor all of these up and coming women. So I think women are doing a ton, but I think we need both men and women to lean in on this if we're going to move the needle.
And which industries are not doing well in terms of helping women along?
Yeah, so the worst industries by the numbers, your numbers are tech, natural resources, and asset management.
And why is that?
Again, it's kind of hard to say.
Because I guess this percentage of women is less. Maybe?
Yeah. It's the pipeline. The percentage of women is left the whole way around. I think it could also be to do with who the ultimate consumer is. One of the industries we see perform very well is retail. And I think that's because a lot of their consumers are women, and so their leadership team reflects who they serve.
So do you think we would need like a critical mass of women in these industries to make any headway?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Definitely having women at the top. Women tend to follow women for whatever reason, and maybe it is because women are sponsoring women and men are sponsoring women. So certainly representation helps, but to speed that along, I think sponsorship is a huge tactic.
Well, let's talk about the campaign itself.
Yeah.
Hashtag Go Sponsor Her. Yeah. How does the campaign work?
Yes. So the campaign works quite simply. A leader again chooses a sponsoree, takes a picture, posts it on social media with the hashtag Go Sponsor Her, challenges other leaders to do the same. How
many people have joined in so far? We've got some tweets.
Yes, yeah. I think the latest numbers, I think we're somewhere around 80-ish leaders, but we have some really big names. The energy behind this has been incredible. We have, Dave McKay, Victor Dodig, a bunch of executives from the banks, John Ruffalo, Mark Wiseman, just Michelle Romanow, Nora Offerter, a ton of people. So,
and how do you initiate this? Do you approach your boss?
How do you initiate a sponsorship relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Great question. I think that's been one of the issues historically is sometimes these are hard to start because like any relationship, you want these relationships to evolve somewhat organically. So how do you take that next step and say, can you sponsor me? I think that's one of the things we were trying to achieve with the campaign. It's a fun way of saying, do you want to be my sponsor or will you sponsor me? Let's do this challenge together. It gives people a fun way to start engaging in sponsorship.
And how should the sponsor go about working to help the women they've sponsored or want to sponsor?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think very tactically, there are a number of things you can do. You can make sure that you are talking about that person, again, behind closed doors. So making sure that your network of leaders know about your sponsoree. Making sure that you have your ear out for opportunities that your sponsoree may not be aware of, and then sharing those with your sponsoree. I think there is still an element of coaching and feedback, maybe giving that feedback that maybe your sponsoree doesn't always want to hear. I know my sponsor has given me feedback that isn't necessarily, what you always want to hear, but you need to get that tough feedback in order to develop. Like what? Oh,
because I think the idea of sponsoring is also being able to put a mirror in front of you and say, this is in order for you to move ahead, this is what you need to work on, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think so probably the hardest piece of feedback I got from my sponsor, which I absolutely needed to hear, was that being a good consultant is about supporting your client and making your client the star, not being the star yourself. So you don't always need to be the one who's doing really well and is center of attention. You need your client to be that person. And so
Great advice.
It's great advice, but it's not always an easy thing to hear, right? You're telling me I want to be the center of attention, but I needed to hear it, and so things like that. But also creating leadership opportunities. Early in my days at McKinsey, my sponsor created an opportunity for me to lead a pro bono study. So I wasn't at a point in my career where I could immediately start leading a full client study. It was, my first couple months, but this pro bono thing, we could do that together, and I could lead the effort.
And they saw your potential.
Yeah, they saw my potential, and they gave me that opportunity. So.
And if you're getting sponsored, if you're the person that's being sponsored, what's your responsibility in the equation for hashtag Go Sponsor Her?
It's a great question. Yeah, because I think it's really important. Sponsorship is reciprocal. So you need to work hard for your sponsor in order to also, quite frankly, make them look good. They're sticking their neck out on the line for you. So when you do get that opportunity, perform.
And have you had sponsors in your career so far? I know we just talked about one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to show some more treats now too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I've had a couple. I've had so Bruce Simpson, who's actually doing the challenge with me. I've also had
there he is on the screen.
Oh, there he is. There you go. I've also had another woman at McKinsey, Tiffany Vogel, who's been a massive part of my career to date. So yeah, I've definitely had sponsors along the way.
And what do you hope for the campaign to accomplish as far as pushing women forward?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. So in the short term, it's really about reach. One of the huge elements of the campaign is education, because sponsorship doesn't mean something to everybody today. And so we want to change the global conversation around what sponsorship is, why it matters, what's the difference between sponsorship and mentorship. The second goal is longevity of these relationships. It's not enough for someone to go to lunch with a woman and say, great, I'm sponsoring you, my job here's done. We want these sponsorship relationships to be meaningful, longer-term relationships so that they turn into more women in leadership. And so how we plan to do that is following up with some of the folks who've been really involved in the campaign and hearing their stories at different moments in time and sharing those stories.
And we'll follow the journey online at hashtag Go Sponsor Her.
That's it.
Megan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
That was Megan Anderson, co-founder of hashtag Go Sponsor Her.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.